Right, let's do this. Hey, and welcome to the vlog. My name's Drew. I'm a poker player currently based in Tasmania, Australia, but hopefully by my accent you can tell that I'm originally from England. Now, the reason I'm making this vlog is because I think I've come up with a really unique and untapped market in the YouTube space to track and improve my poker journey, and that is to start a vlog. I'm pretty sure it's something that people would be interested in watching. As far as I can tell, no one's done that on this platform. Okay, fine, but nobody's doing tournament-based vlogs. Well, no one's doing them in Australia. Fine, well, nobody's doing them who's English. Fuck's sake. Alright, well, how about an English fella playing pub poker in Australia? We good now? We good? Now, as I make my way down to the venue for tonight's game, I'll give you a brief overview of how the games and structures run. I typically play 2 nights a week, normally Mondays and Wednesdays. On the Monday night, there's a $700 guarantee, a 20k starting stack with a 20 or 30k add-on or re-entry. These vary from $30 to $40 buy-ins. Kicks off at 7 PM with 15-minute blinds, and there's typically 24 to 34 runners. And Wednesday nights are a bounties game, so it's $40 with $10 as a bounty on each player's head. There are other games and structures that are played, but I'll discuss them when I start playing them. Hopefully with that all explained, let's get into the first hand. So we sit down, and the very first hand we play, we're on the button. It gets raised under the gun to 300, the blinds are 1 and 1. We have King 8 of hearts. I call because the player raising is quite loose. Calls round in the blinds, so we've got a little pot going up there. Flop comes out and we hit our king. Checks around to us, we put a bet of 300 out there just to see where we're at. We get small blind fold, big blind calls, and the initial raiser raises to 16. We call. Big blind folds, we turn another king, so we hit trips on the turn. Villain checks, I check back for deception. Jack comes on the river, pretty much a brick, I'm already losing to King Jack, King 10. Villain checks, I bet 2,000 to try and get a little bit of value, as I've been playing quite passively so far. Villain folds, I show the 8 of hearts as a bit of a bluff, and we take down a nice sized pot in the first hand. The next hand we have King Jack offsuit under the gun +1. The blinds are still 100. Under the gun folds, we raise to 400 as it's still early enough to try something. Player on my left calls. The cutoff then raises to 1,000. Both the big and small blind fold. I decide to call, not in the best of positions, but I've already got 400 in there. Player to my left also calls, and we see a flop. The flop comes Queen 5-10 with 2 diamonds. We don't hit, but we obviously have the up and down straight draw. I decide to lead out here for 15,000. This is where the initial raiser re-raises me to 3,500. I think for a bit here before deciding to raise all in, given the pot size. And as previously mentioned, this player is fairly loose and can be doing this with all manner of hands. He could have any suited connectors with the diamonds, he could have hit the board, he could have just have ace high. Unfortunately, this time he has the Queen 7 of hearts. Hitting top pair on the board, I'll need an ace king or a 9 to beat him. Unfortunately, it doesn't run out that way for me. I only hit my jack and he takes me out. However, I am not out. The way this game works is that they have a rebuy, therefore I'm back in the game. Next big hand, the blinds are now 1 and 2. I have pocket 3s in the small blind. There are 2 limpers in early and middle position. I decided this is a good spot to raise, making it 1,500. Big blind and the 2 limpers both call. The flop comes 6, 5, 3, rainbow. The under the gun player, who I've had previous with, bets out to 7,000. At this point, he could probably be doing that with an overpair or even a potential straight draw. The blinds fold. I decide that I've got to be good here most of the time, and he's just drawing, so I decide to stick it all in and see where he's got. The villain calls and turns over 5-2 of diamonds, so as expected, drawing to a 4 and runner backdoor flush. Thankfully, none of those options come in, and our set of 3s are very good. We break in a nice little pot. Next hand, the blinds are up to 300, 600. We're sitting in the big blind with ace 9 offsuit. Cut off calls, and then the small blind raises raises to 1600. I decided to call here. I'm defending my big blind with an ace. It's not a bad decision. The cutoff also calls to close the action. Flop comes down and we have 8-2-4 rainbow. The small blind, who was the initial raiser, leads out for 16, so it's a relatively small bet. At this point, sitting there with 2 overs to the board, I think he's probably not that strong here, so I think it's worth continuing just to see where we pick up any equity on the turn. Turn brings in an absolute belter card for us. We hit our 9, so we now have top pair on the board. Small blind checks. We decide to check back just in case there are any random 2 pairs. The river brings in the 3 of hearts. Pretty bricky card. No flushes out there. There's very rare straights. Ace 5, 5, 6. I think most of the time we're good here. I decide to lead out for a bet of 2,500. Cutoff folds and the small blind calls. Not quite sure what I'm expecting him to turn over here, but it turns out his check on the river was a pretty sneaky one as he rivered a set of 3s. The next hand, the blinds are up to 400, 800, and we're in the low jack, and we find ourselves with pocket 8s. We get 2 limpers, under the gun and under the gun plus 2. And in our position here, I think we've only got one decision, that's to stick our remaining 4,600 in the middle and try and get some value out of this pair of 8s. We just get flat called by the hijack. Small blind folds and the big blind calls. Folds around, including the small and the big blind. The under the gun limper calls and the plus 2 limper folds. 2 live players against my all in. Obviously not the best place to be, but we see a flop and it comes down to 10, 9, 2 spades. The 2 runners quickly check. The turn brings in the queen of clubs, both check again. The river brings in another queen and both players check again. Under the gun announces 6 high, whilst the hijack shows king 7 of clubs for a miss straight and flush draw. And my 8s hold and we get a nice little triple up. I've missed a bit of the action, but I've gone all in for 21,000 over the top of 2 limpers. I'm in the cutoff with king queen and the small blind folds, the big blind calls and the under the gun limper calls as well. The other limper decides on a fold. Yet again, I'm all in against 2 live players for my tournament life, and we go to a flop which comes 3, 3, queen, obviously hitting top pair on the board. 2 live players check and we see a turn, and the turn brings in a third 3. Checks again. The river comes pretty bricky 8. Obviously now we're feeling quite comfortable about this hand, and both villains show that they were only playing ace high. For the next hand, we've moved tables. The blinds are still 2,000, 4,000, and I'm in the big blind. The field's getting thinner. The button limps in, and the small blind folds. Odd choice, but whatever. We're heads up to a flop, which comes queen, ace, 6, 2 hearts. Both check the flop. Turn brings the 5 of hearts. Obviously the potential flush draw now gets there. I lead out for 4,000 to try and realise some of the value we have in our hand, and the villain calls. The river kind of brings a horrible card, queen of clubs, so it fits our 2 pair. We're losing to all aces with better kickers, so I decide to check and the villain checks back. Turnover and he announces king high and we take it down. And the last big hand of the night that we capture, we're in middle position and we have 9, 10 offsuit. I decide just to limp in this position. Button decides to raise it up to 12. Small blind calls and it puts the big blind all in for 12. And at this point I'm pretty priced in, so I just call for the extra 6 and we go to a flop. Flop comes 8, jack, 4, rainbow. The small blind checks, I also check. The initial raiser on the button decides to lead out for 12,000. Small blind calls. I decide in this position with my up and down straight draw to call. Turn brings me my money card as the 7 comes in and I hit my straight. At this point I decide to go all in, seeing as my stack size is about a half pot bet. Try and get as much value as I can out of this hand after hitting my straight. The button pretty much snap folds. He also does flash a 6. The small blind thinks for a fairly long time and eventually lays down jacks. Obviously we're still up against the all-in player, but our straight is good against his ace high. The river brings in a 9, but that doesn't help the all-in player, and we take it down. So a big fold from the jacks, and we get a nice little double up. It was at this point of the night that my phone ran out of battery. However, I did go on to come a third for the evening, cash in $125 for the night, and going forward I'll do my best to make sure my phone is fully charged to actually capture the rest of the final table. So if I give a quick rundown of how I think my game went. For the most part, the hands that I played were pretty solid. The only questionable hand that I think I played was the Jack King early on, where I lost all my stack. I was playing the player, I made a move, and it didn't pay off. I still think with the King Jack, I didn't need to go all in there. That was a mistake on my part. However, I did end up coming third and cash in, so it did all play out well in the end. Anyway, that's a wrap for the first episode. Let me know what you thought of the hands and how I played them, and give me some discussion in the comments and we can go through them. And until next time, be lucky.